This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. Good news is my opponent, David Muir, and I come on at very different times, so you don't have to decide which one to watch. Here's what we got for y'all. Tonight we hear from doctors and parents about plans to add kids to COVID-19 vaccine trials. And we take a look at a new study on the biggest source of disinformation about the virus. Can you guess who it is? But first, here's what you need to know right now. We still haven't flattened the curve. Coronavirus cases are on the rise again in the US with close to 60,000 new cases per day. 36 states have seen an uptick in cases in the last 14 days, many reaching their highest levels since the pandemic began. Across the US, COVID-19 daily case numbers last peaked in August. This new spike in cases has public health experts worried about holiday travel. The Centers for Disease Control have already recommended against flying to see family for the holidays.
The COVID-19 numbers are clearly going in the wrong direction.
Across the Atlantic, Europe is dealing with its own new spike in cases, prompting curfews and renewed restrictions to stop the spread of COVID.
The central change is that people cannot now meet other households socially indoors. This applies in any setting, at home or in a restaurant or in any other venue.
Across the globe, COVID-19's death toll has topped 1 million. About 1/5 of those deaths have come in the US. No presidential debate tonight, instead dueling town halls. President Trump and Democratic challenger Joe Biden answer questions from voters from two battleground states on competing television networks. The town halls replace what would have been the second presidential debate, which was canceled after Trump refused to participate when the event went virtual over COVID concerns. With the town halls airing at the same time, it's impossible to watch both candidates live, so Americans must choose between the two, basically resulting in a petty ratings showdown. With only 3 weeks until the election and Biden holding a strong lead in polling, both candidates are also out on the campaign trail in several key swing states. There's still one final presidential debate scheduled for October 22nd in Nashville, Tennessee. Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett is one step closer to the bench.
The precedent is clear for a long, long time that if the President and Senate are of the same party, the Senate, in all but extraordinary circumstances, confirms that nominee.
After 3 days of public hearings, members of the Senate Judiciary Committee announced plans to vote on October 22nd to advance Barrett's nomination and hold a final vote on the Senate floor the following day. We have the votes, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that at an event in his home state on Thursday. The Kentucky senator says he's confident Judge Barrett has the support of at least 51 Republicans, which would be enough to win Senate confirmation. Meanwhile, Democrats took another chance to highlight the hypocrisy of Republicans racing to get President Trump's pick confirmed before the November 3rd election when they refused to vote on President Obama's nominee Merrick Garland in 2016.
This rushed sham process is a disservice to our committee. She has been rushed in a way that is historically unprecedented.
If confirmed, Judge Barrett would fill the seat of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and cement the conservative majority on the nation's highest court. A number of vaccine trials are taking place as we speak to get us closer to a coronavirus vaccine. Every US trial has had at least one thing in common. Nobody under the age of 16 has been included. So far, pharmaceutical company Pfizer won FDA approval this week to begin enrolling children as young as 12 in their vaccine trials. That way, scientists can know exactly how a vaccine will affect children. Newsy's Lindsay Thies spoke to doctors and parents about Pfizer's plan to include younger teens and preteens in their vaccine trials.
For Elizabeth Power of Nebraska, like so many parents in this pandemic, the well-being of her 3 children is most important.
That's a little scary as a parent. How will this impact my child? Could my kiddo be the one that is severely impacted that ends up in the ICU? I don't want to take that risk.
The latest numbers show more than 277,000 kids in the U.S. have gotten sick with COVID-19. More than 3,000 have been hospitalized. Over 100 children have died. Now the FDA has okayed drug maker Pfizer to let kids as young as 12 test its experimental COVID vaccine candidate. A Pfizer spokesperson told Newsy their clinical trial researchers are, quote, following a careful stepwise approach as we move down to younger age groups, end quote. Dr. Mark Esper, a pediatric infectious disease specialist at the Cleveland Clinic, says he's getting a lot of questions from parents about a COVID vaccine for children.
They want to know when, and then they want to know, is it going to be effective? And then they want to know, is it going to be safe? And for the most part, those are the things that we're waiting for these trials.
He adds, though, children's immune systems look different as they mature. So a 10-year-old, 13-year-old, and 16-year-old could respond very differently to an experimental vaccine.
No vaccine will be FDA approved for children until it is tested in children.
The American Academy of Pediatrics supports the move. In early October, AAP President Dr. Sally Goza wrote the Department of Health and Human Services urging children be included in the vaccine trials, even though they are far less likely to get seriously ill from the virus.
It's only rare if it's not your child. And so if it's your child, it's not rare.
If drug makers want to test patients younger than 12, it would require a new study and possibly a modified formulation or dosing schedule. Pfizer says they're working with regulators on a potential pediatric study plan for that. Goza says it's important for transparency now to help parents understand the methodical nature of the process doesn't mean it has to move slowly. Health experts also add, just like in adult trials, any adolescent participant pool needs to be diverse.
We really do want, a wide swath of ages, races, ethnicities. It's really important that this vaccine work for everyone, or if it doesn't, that we understand why and we can compare other vaccines and see, how might one better fit a population than another.
The data does show that our Black and Latinx children are at higher risk for complications of COVID. And that's a very concerning issue.
Pfizer had announced including 16 to 18-year-olds in September. It's one of 4 companies in advanced phase 3 clinical trials in the U.S. 2 others are on hold after testers came down with an unexplained illness. And for moms like Elizabeth Power, that may place doubt.
That is a lot of responsibility for any family, and especially a preteen, to kind of understand what they're going through.
The American Academy of Pediatrics says they're hopeful a COVID-19 vaccine will be available for children by fall 2021. Lindsay Thies, Newsy, Denver.
It might be a little late for one, but we're going to take a quick coffee break. If I seem a little jittery through the rest of the show, just know it's the caffeine and not the performance anxiety. Part of me wants to start off this section with Ice Cube's verse from NWA's Straight Outta Compton, but I don't think I can pull that off. And this is a PG-13 show, so let's just get on with the trending topics, shall we? This one is a little surprising. Hip-hop artist Ice Cube, the same man who made a song called Arrest the President and tweeted that he would never endorse President Trump, is now advising the president on policy plans to help Black Americans. Folks were first made aware of the partnership called the Platinum Plan through a tweet from Trump administration's senior advisor Katrina Pearson, which led to a collective, huh? Here's how Cube partially explained the partnership on Instagram.
I just know one of them gonna win. And I don't know if it can really matter to us. We gotta just push whoever is in there, because ain't nobody really solved our problems.
There's still a lot of questions around how this partnership came to pass. Why would the Trump administration seek out a rapper who made his name in the 90s instead of a policy expert? Why would a man who has been a consistent critic of this administration turn around and work with him? Let's just say 2020 has been a surprising year that even in the final months refuses to let off the gas. Folks online are popping off on NBC after the network scheduled a town hall with President Trump as a bit of counter-programming against ABC's town hall with Joe Biden at the exact same time. NBC announced the town hall Wednesday. Tweets from the president's detractors shouldn't be very surprising here, but many have voiced their disapproval for the network hosting this town hall after President Trump refused to play ball with the Commission on Presidential Debates. To be fair, NBC has said they're offering President Trump the same platform they offered Biden just last week during his town hall. Only difference here is that Savannah Guthrie will be helming things instead of Lester Holt. But to schedule this town hall the same time as another doesn't seem like much help to voters actually trying to make sense of this chaotic election cycle. Here's to hoping viewers can flip between the two and piece together Trump and Biden's answers on similar topics, almost like a debate. Bama football fans are shooketh after head coach and patron saint of play calling Nick Saban announced he tested positive for COVID-19.
You know, we've had a lot of challenges this year. Our guys have had shown great maturity in how they've handled all those challenges. So I'm sure they'll handle this in a very positive way as well.
Saban, who is 68, found out about his positive diagnosis on Wednesday and immediately isolated himself at home, adding that he hadn't experienced any symptoms. The school's athletics director also tested positive. The news comes as Bama, the number 2 team, is set to play SEC rival Georgia, the number 3 team, this weekend. So far, the game is still on. Interestingly enough, Saban said he was able to monitor his team's practice from Zoom and over the phone. Honestly, having one of the most well-known football coaches in history barking, "Give me some burpees!" via Zoom is one of the funniest things this pandemic could possibly deliver. Roll Tide, or Go Dogs, depending on your affiliation. Generally, we try not to focus too much on President Trump's social media behavior on this show for a number of reasons. For one, we just don't have enough time to dissect the deluge of posts from the tweeter-in-chief. But Trump's COVID-19 diagnosis and recovery have presented a new opportunity for him to spread false information about a virus that's killed more than 215,000 Americans. Newsy's Tyler Atkinson spoke to experts who say these messages have opened the floodgates to even more coronavirus falsehoods.
Since President Donald Trump announced his COVID-19 diagnosis to his millions of followers on social media, he's used the platforms to make dubious claims about the disease, like that it's less dangerous than the flu.
The president is no stranger when it comes to sharing false information on social media, but his approach of providing his own thoughts on COVID-19 have opened the doors to mis- and disinformation.
The president has clearly attempted to shape the public health messaging to fit his theory of the case, rather than going to the scientists at the CDC, at the NIH, understanding the problem, and then shaping his messaging to reflect that science.
You have the president saying one thing on Twitter, then you have the chief of staff of the White House saying something else, and what that results in is apart from just chaos, is the rise of conspiracy theory and the rise of dis and misinformation.
Even before Trump's diagnosis, he was seen as a super spreader of false COVID info, suggesting that most cases were harmless, that children are virtually immune, and that the virus would someday just disappear. Cornell University researchers analyzed 38 million English language articles about the pandemic and found Trump was responsible for more than a third of the misinformation conversation.
People like Donald Trump are able to use social media in such a fashion and then benefit also from the numbers of bots and sock puppets and fake traffic that are there in such a way that they create the illusion of consensus around these ideas that they're bringing up.
Critics say Trump's approach has driven a wedge in the public's understanding about the disease and whether the president can be trusted.
The national average of folks who believe that the president is responsible for a great deal of misinformation circulating today is 58%. Among young people 18 to 34, that number is 68%. 94% of Democrats believe that, 58% of independents, and only 11% of Republicans.
There have been calls for social media companies to do more to stop these false information spreads, but their approaches haven't been uniform.
For instance, Twitter recently blocked a claim where Trump said he was immune from COVID. Facebook took no action. When Trump's posts have been blocked, he's reacted by calling for the repeal of Section 230. A law social media companies value because it protects them in how they regulate content. On Wednesday, he reiterated this threat after Twitter and Facebook limited the spread of a New York Post story he tweeted about. Scientists who work for the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative worry that this lack of action around scientific misinformation could have public health consequences. They sent a letter to Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg earlier this year, urging him to adopt stricter rules on misinformation.
The mission statement of CZI is to better society and find cures for disease. And so it's very frustrating when you see misinformation on Facebook, especially related to COVID, for example, where it really does result in, potentially life or death for people. There's the fact that now the public is starting to mistrust scientists. And then, so for us, that's making our job, harder and harder. Because at some point, for example, we're going to say, hey, he has a vaccine for COVID, and there's already mistrust about this.
Shepard added that social media platforms need to take a harder line on removing false scientific information.
At some point, this is going to be about climate change and various other aspects of society where scientists can contribute to solving those problems.
Tyler Adkison, Newsy, Chicago.
Experts have raised concerns about ideas around herd immunity, something that many say we're not even close to achieving. Earlier this week, the White House signaled its support for a declaration that rejects lockdown policies and supports building herd immunity through, wait for it, natural infection. The declaration, which was composed by a group of scientists and has thousands of signatures, suggests countries protect the most vulnerable while allowing those at lowest risk of death to just contract the virus and then build immunity. Voila, herd immunity. The thing is, it's not that simple, and many experts have said that we are a long ways off from achieving herd immunity. And in America, as much as 90% of us are still susceptible. Newsy's virology series has been breaking down the pandemic since day one. In this next story, Newsy's Cody LeGros explains why ideas around herd immunity make a lot of experts kind of nervous.
Herd immunity. It's when a majority of a population becomes immune to an infectious disease. Depending on how contagious a virus is, this usually means 70 to 90% of people need to be immune to achieve herd immunity. Typically, this is done through a vaccine or mass infection. The former can take months or even years. The latter could overwhelm hospitals and result in more deaths. To get there, the most vulnerable populations are at a greater risk, which explains why achieving herd immunity is not that simple. Herd immunity is sometimes touted as an easy fix to the coronavirus pandemic.
Herd immunity, which is, I believe, is to be the best form of fighting off a virus like this, even better than the vaccine.
That actually it's okay if you all get it. People will, build up immunity and antibodies.
When you hear Bolsonaro say that 70% of the population are going to get it, I think you have to assume that that indeed is what Bolsonaro is aiming for.
We can't stay in our houses forever. We can't. That's true. So to me, the question is, how do we go out and still reduce our risk and be safe?
Amber D'Souza is a professor of epidemiology at Johns Hopkins University. Her message, we should be doing less of this and something more like this.
The best way to achieve herd immunity in the U.S. is to continue some measure of social distancing and reduced interaction for a while until we develop a safe vaccine. And then to vaccinate everyone so that they have protection and achieve herd immunity that way.
So why are some viewing herd immunity as a concept similar to ripping off the Band-Aid and getting it over with? D'Souza says we simply don't know enough to view it this way.
We all want to get it over with. The problem is when public health works, it protects us from seeing the worst consequences. And then people say, oh, it's not so bad.
It isn't until it is. Take a look at Sweden. The country had looser social restrictions during the pandemic in an effort to reach herd immunity, a move favored by the public. Overall, it has more COVID-19 deaths than other Nordic countries. However, its fatalities per capita remain lower than the UK, Spain, Italy, and France. The Swedish Public Health Agency released findings that showed only 7.3% of people in Stockholm developed antibodies. Despite that, Sweden's chief epidemiologist said Stockholm's immunity rate is likely a little more than 20%, but lower than 30%. When compared to the US, which had stricter social distancing policies, Sweden saw higher deaths per million people. The biggest victims in Sweden, migrant communities, and the elderly.
As a population in the US, it's very unlikely that 10% of us have been exposed so far. It's likely much, much smaller than that. And you don't achieve herd immunity until, you're 60, 70% of your population.
Without a vaccine, lower infection rates, and greater access to testing, herd immunity is a concept that may never be achieved. Until then,
this infection is here to live with us. It's pretty infectious. So if we have these measures where we're able to socially isolate and bring down the infection rate when we open back up, it will spread again eventually.
If you haven't already, feel free to holler at us on Twitter using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. Feedback is always welcome, but Netflix show suggestions are preferred. In 2009, a former Army psychiatrist carried out the deadliest mass shooting on an American military base. 13 people were killed and 32 others were injured during the attack at Fort Hood in Texas. The shooter has been on death row for 11 years, but his attorneys argue he didn't get a fair trial and should be spared the death penalty. Newsy's Therese Garnier has more.
Attorneys for a former Army psychiatrist who has been on death row for over a decade for killing 13 people during a shooting rampage on Fort Hood is requesting a sentencing retrial. John Potter, one of former Army Major Nidal Hasan's attorneys, stood before 3 judges and argued his client had a, quote, sham of a trial before being convicted of 13 counts of murder and 32 counts of premeditated murder for the 2009 shootings. Only 14 people were allowed to witness the proceedings. Of those people, Alonzo Lunsford. He said he was shot 7 times.
And even to my last dying breath, now I'm going to use that to save those people that were inside.
Potter argued Hasan never had a psychological evaluation and was not competent to represent himself when he was tried in 2013. He also said that Hasan broke the law by pleading guilty, a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Potter added that 2 panel members at the trial may have been biased and that there should have been a change of venue away from the fort for safety and fairness reasons. But government lawyers responded that Hasan was found competent, and the judge spoke to each panel member and found they could judge the case without prejudice. The government also argued that there was no need for a change of venue because all panel members were not from Fort Hood, nor were they there on the installation when the shooting occurred.
Here it is 10 years later. He wants to appeal it? For what? It hurts. And I'm angry. I'm real angry. So, I mean, that's just how it is.
He said he did not feel justice has been served, and now he carries around these to remind him how far he has come since that tragic day.
I would sit down and I'd greet him with a right hand of fellowship. And I would grip his hand tight. And when he tries to move his hand, I would not let go. And I would maintain that grip and let him know when I leave from out of this cell, this meeting room, I can go where I want to go, when I want to go, how I want to go, at my pleasure, at my leisure. That's what I would tell him. So those pains that he feels, think about those 14 that he took away from us that day. Think about the 32 that he tried to take away from us that day. And out of everybody that got hit, I'm 6'9½", 300 pounds. And I was within 5 feet of him, and he couldn't get the target right. Poor choice, very poor choice.
The judges listened to over 2 hours of arguments from the defense and government appellate counsels. They said they're going to review all the information so that way they can determine if Nidal Hasan indeed deserves a sentencing retrial. Therese Garnier, Newsy, for Belvoir.
COVID-19 has driven skiers and snowboarders away from resorts and into the backcountry, basically an area that's unmarked, unmonitored, and quite literally off the beaten path. But as winter creeps closer, there are growing concerns among avalanche experts that too many novices will be in over their heads in the backcountry. Newsy's Meg Hilling explains.
Avalanche experts and mountain communities in the U.S. are bracing for winter as COVID-19 drives a growing number of skiers and snowboarders away from resorts and into the backcountry, a dangerous recreational shift that could leave a costly mark.
They wanted to get out in the mountains, didn't have anything else to do, which is great, but they went out without any training and were able to get themselves in trouble.
With ski resorts closed or limiting access, Jim Donovan, director of Colorado's Silverton Avalanche School, says people have been pouring into the backcountry in search of places to ski and snowboard, many of them inexperienced, all of them on terrain that could humble even the most seasoned athlete.
So there was a huge surge in cases, in incidents that we saw at the end of last winter. It ranged from really experienced users to just brand new people out there who didn't even know how to use any of their rescue equipment.
Donovan says this winter isn't looking any better.
We are really preparing on both the local and state level and national level to really handle a big increase in backcountry use.
Bearing the brunt of this are backcountry towns like Silverton, Colorado, in the heart of the San Juan mountain range. Located more than 9,000 feet above sea level, Silverton is an hour-and-a-half drive from the nearest hospital, a distance that puts search and rescue responsibilities squarely on volunteers and the community.
We are the ones who get the phone call and have to step up and come help you. It's not just about you as a skier. It is about your friends, family, and our community's lives that you put at risk when we have to come save you from your avalanche accident.
A responsibility now complicated by the risk of COVID exposure avalanche rescue teams face.
They don't want to bring the virus home.
As an avalanche center, we feel that we have our work cut out for us in reaching these new user groups.
Chad Bracklesberg is the executive director of the Utah Avalanche Center, and his team are one of dozens of nonprofits doubling down on outreach efforts.
It's going to be really critical that people understand the danger that they could potentially put somebody in, as well as just their own personal and their group safety.
Even the most avid, educated backcountry skier are those whose lives get taken and or involved in an accident.
Professional big mountain skiers and ski mountaineers are calling for everyone, as they put it, to know before you go.
There is a lot of online resources, and I'm sure there are some classroom sessions or outdoor sessions where you can learn how to use your equipment. So you build yourself up. Yeah, you don't want to just go out and ski the hardest thing you possibly can.
It is absolutely imperative that you have an avalanche beacon, shovel, probe, partner, and the knowledge of how to use those safety devices. Most people start out, they go out skiing and it's all fun, and then they have an accident or a close call, and then they start to reel it back in. The mountain will always be there, and you can always go back when you're better prepared, when you have the appropriate equipment and you know how to use it. Make decisions so you can live to ski another day.
For Newsy, I'm Meg Hilling.
That's it for us, gang. As always, thanks for watching. We'll be back with more in the loop next week, same time, same place. Top stories from Newsy are headed your way right now.